Hello, North Hills. Recently, we made a few changes to our COVID-19 tracker, and we thought it would be a good time to kind of go through some of those changes and hopefully give our families a better understanding of how we are keeping track of all the cases in our schools. So the top portion of our tracker, as you see here, has not changed very much since we started keeping track of cases at the beginning of the school year. You see active cases district-wide at the top here. Broken down by students and staff, and then of course broken down by building. This part here is new. We are now keeping track of active cases of virtual students, and these are students who are North Hills students. They're not in the online academy, but they are North Hills students assigned to a building, but they're not attending in person. And currently, we are not keeping track of them in our 14-day rolling total by building, which I will explain here in a few minutes. It's important to note that cases are added to the tracker when that student or staff member develops symptoms. If the student or staff member is asymptomatic, the date that they were tested is the date that they get added to the tracker. And then the case is active for 10 days from that date. And this is CDC guidance. The new part of the tracker below is our cases by building in the most recent 14-day period. So this allows us to keep track of each building, the number of cases in the rolling most recent 14-day period. And this is so we can follow state guidance from the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And this guidance will allow us to kind of determine whether or not we have to discuss potentially closing one of these schools. So as you see here, we have our 6 schools, and they're broken down by size. So our middle school and our high school are our 2 large buildings. Highcliffe, McIntyre, and Ross are medium-sized buildings. And then our Westview is our small school. And this is all defined by the state. So the state says at a small school, when there's 2 to 4 cases, you have to consider closing the school to clean and contact trace. For a medium-sized school, it's 4 to 6 cases. For a large school, it is 6 to 10 cases. So as you can see, the different shaded color represents those thresholds, right? So as a medium-sized school, Ross is just at that lower end of the threshold with 4 cases to potentially have the conversation to close. This is just visually represented a little bit different in this graph below with the circles. So when that circle's darkest area fills red, that is when that school is at its lowest or lower end of the threshold. So with Ross's case, that is why it's completely full. It's at the 4 cases. Again, it's directly at the bottom of this slightly darker shaded gray area. And that is when it says, okay, we're gonna have a conversation with the Allegheny County Health Department and determine whether or not Ross should close. In this particular case, we've talked to them several times over the last few days. And due to the proximity of the cases when they occurred, the timeline, et cetera, they don't feel it necessary that Ross should close. But again, because it is at that threshold, it's one of the schools that we are keeping an eye on very closely. One of the other important things to note about the different case counts in both the most 14-day period and the active case counts, a lot of times they might be different. So for instance, you see that while the high school has 5 and 5, the middle school, for instance, has 3 cases in the most recent 14-day period, but only one of those cases remains active. So what that should show or tell you is that 2 of those 3 cases in the most recent 14 days are older than 10 days and no longer active. Same thing with McIntyre. So McIntyre has 2 cases in the most recent 14-day period. One of those cases is older than 10 days because only 1 case remains active. And that's the same thing with Ross, as there's only 3 active cases. 1, it should tell you, is older than 10 days. And then if you, of course, continue to scroll down, the bottom portion of the COVID tracker just shows the cases over time. And this is district-wide. And then, of course, if you click on the different tabs, you can see the cases since the start of the school year in all of our buildings. So again, I hope this was helpful to families. 2 quick things that I'll also mention is that when a building does close and learning is moved virtual, the cases in the most recent 14-day period will reset to zero. So if that building closes, contact tracing and cleaning takes a day or two. It will reopen 2 to 3 days later with a 14-day case count of zero. That building will open. And then another quick thing is that as if you mouse over this little I information button, there's a lot of different variables that kind of go into this tracker, as you might imagine. So it could take as long as 15 minutes to kind of fully refresh and update. So if you look at it and things might seem a little weird or not what you would expect, kind of give it a few minutes, refresh, and go back to see, and it should resolve itself. So again, thank you. I hope this was helpful.